Welcome to Year 5 STTC Writing for Term 2, Week 2. Writing and effective response. It is important to follow the marking guidelines so that we can address all the details the marker will be looking for. The following writing test and how it will be marked is based on the general assessment criteria that you can find on the education website. But let's go through the ways that we should write and what markers will be looking for. So when it comes to a writing test, you'll usually be given a stimulus. This can be an image, statement, heading, or a question. There are many different types for all kinds of writing text types. And you need to understand that you'll be given 2 pages for the writing test, and that is the maximum amount you should write for any exam. And the assessment for the writing test is based on if the writing is about the stimulus topic. So you won't get any marks if you do not write something that is based on what is given to you. If you sway away from the topic, you will lose marks. So focus on the stimulus topic. Your quality of thinking about a topic, so how well you understand the topic and how you are able to communicate your ideas in relation to this topic for the reader. The next point is how clearly your ideas are organized. So organization of ideas and also structure-wise as well. Are your ideas interesting and imaginative? So are they unique? Are they special? How are you going to draw the reader in? And also your use of language. So when it comes to use of language, this depends on the specific text type. So you would use more descriptive, vivid imagery sort of language for maybe short stories or descriptive texts, persuasive or convincing language for a persuasive piece of writing. So it really depends on the type of genre you'll be writing based on the given question. So you need to think quickly and adapt to the question as quick as possible. So your writing must be your own work, and if it's not unique, if it's very cliched storyline or very general points for a discussion, you will lose marks because the reader would not be interested. And also, do not copy any known ideas as well. So make your own ideas, make sure you express them in a clear way. This is just a general marking guideline for all types of writing texts, but you do need to make sure that you read the question properly, and we will go through the first test for this term. So this is the first writing task that we'll be going through for today, writing a competition. So let's read through the stimulus together. This is going to include a lot of information, and also based on the type of stimulus it's giving to you, we can see that it's going to be sort of semi-visual, but mostly your information will be found in the text given to you. So if we look at the stimulus here, we can see that we are required to submit a piece of work for a competition. So this would be the purpose of this text. Then if we go down and read it together, want your words blasted into space, want to communicate with an extraterrestrial? Well, here's your chance to do just that and also represent all human beings and our planet Earth. So the first point asks, what's this competition all about? In our search for extraterrestrial life, we are looking for a piece of writing which tells alien life forms about humans and Earth, as well as inviting them to come visit us. The winning piece of writing will be sent into space, hopefully to be found by an extraterrestrial life form. So we can see that the purpose of this competition is to invite humans to come to Earth, but we need evidence for them to be convinced or persuaded to come to Earth. So we are going to enter this piece of writing into the competition to see if they will be convinced, essentially, and visit humans. So we'll underline the main points. So we need a piece of writing which tells alien life forms about humans and Earth, as well as inviting them to come visit us. Now, what do you have to do? Compose a piece of writing which describes what human beings are like. You don't have to describe our appearance as photographs will accompany your piece of writing. It is more important to describe our unique features, such as emotions, family, nationalities, religion, art, food, education, what makes humans special, what is important to us, what are our greatest achievements, how could extraterrestrials help us, do we have anything to offer them? So rather than talking about the physical appearance of humans, we are talking about our innate personalities and traits. So we want to promote things that obviously extraterrestrial life forms can't see. They have to come to Earth and experience it themselves. So that is one main point that we need to think about in order for them to be convinced to come to Earth. We need to promote our inner qualities and the intangible things that we can offer them. So that's something to think about. Then moving on, at the bottom it says, it is very important to present the beautiful and positive side of human beings as well as our society on Earth. That way, any extraterrestrial beings who may read your message will want to visit and make peaceful contact with us. Remember to also include a brief but welcoming invitation. So now's the time to get writing to have your words echo throughout the universe. So we can think that because we are inviting them to come visit us, we can essentially say the text type that we're going to write will be a letter form. So we'll be writing a letter, and it's going to be persuasive. Let's write that out. Okay, so on the next page, we've got a planning sheet. This is what your planning section will look like, and we will fill it out together in the next slide. So after reading the given stimulus on the previous slide, we can see that the main purpose of this writing task is to invite extraterrestrials to Earth. So breaking it down further, our task is to submit a text piece describing life on Earth, to intrigue extraterrestrial beings about humans and human lifestyles. So we want to talk to them about humans and how we live, and essentially a new perspective on our lifestyle, but in a way that would convince them to also join us and experience it for themselves as well. So after reading the stimulus, we can identify that the appropriate text type is a persuasive text, and the form or the genre that we're gonna the structure that we're going to use will be a letter, because it is an invitation. So let's highlight that. Persuasive text in the form of a letter. And the appropriate language that we're going to use would be persuasive language techniques. So recall from the first page where we talked about the marking criteria, or what the markers will be looking for. When they look for language for this specific task, they'll be looking for persuasive language techniques, and that only applies for the depending on the type of text that you are going to write. So if you're writing a persuasive text and then you use very strong descriptive imagery language, it could set a very nice scene, but it's not related to what the text is asking for. So you're not essentially answering the questions and you are going to lose marks. So it's very important to understand what the question is talking about, the most suitable format for your writing task, and also the correct language form or language techniques that you're going to apply to make this text more interesting for the reader and essentially attract the reader's attention. So, breaking this specific question down, what markers will be looking for? We have 3 main parts. We've got aspects of human life, what humans can offer, and why aliens should visit Earth. So we broke this question down into 3 parts, and I think this is a very good way to understand the question first. So in the planning section, which we'll go through later on, you should, especially when there's a large chunk of text given to you, you should break the question down into smaller sections and identify what each part you should include and what kind of examples you'll include in order to answer the question properly. So for the first part, we've got aspects of human life. So we should write about the positive sides of human life on Earth, our innate qualities, and how we should welcome them to aliens. So in this part, we can see that because we are trying to promote life on Earth, we would obviously only include the positive sides of human life. Yes, we have negative sides as well, but we are not trying to focus on the area, so we don't need to include that at all. We only need to talk about the good things and the things that will attract these extraterrestrial beings to Earth. So when we talk about innate qualities, we should think about the intangible things. So we've got, culture, religion, sense of society, like belonging, and all that other kind of elements that we want to talk about that is you can't physically touch. So that is also another thing that we should emphasize onto the extraterrestrial beings, where they won't be able to experience it because they can't see it. They have to physically be here and interact with people in order to experience that. So moving on to the next point, we can also say what humans can offer. So we should write about how our diverse societies encourage aliens to peacefully contact us. We could also talk about what we humans could learn from aliens and how this could help both sides. So not just what we can offer them, we also need to show an interest with their life. So their life in outer space, we could be interested in that as well. So that will kind of give them a benefit, kind of like sharing ideas. So I'm able to give you something and you are able to give me something, and not just for benefits, but also for interest, because we are generally curious about it. So that's something we can also emphasize on as well to draw their attention. Focusing on our diversity. So the countries that we've got, the cultures that we have, the traditions, the food, the music, the art, all that stuff we can consider. And our last point is, why should aliens visit Earth? So the general purpose of them and what they can gain out of this experience. So we should talk about how aliens could gain valuable experiences by peacefully visiting Earth. So the valuable experiences would relate back to what humans can offer, and the sense of sharing ideas and learning about, a different sort of way or approach to life in a different dimension or outer space sort of horizon. Moving on to actually writing your response here. So moving to this section. When you plan your text in the planning sheet or the planning section, only use dot points. So jot down your main ideas. You don't need to go deeply into every single detail, because that'll be wasting time, and that detail you'll go through will only be written in your actual response. You need to pace your workload evenly, so don't spend too much time writing the introduction and then run out of time for the middle part, or actually elaborating on examples and then forgetting to put a conclusion. That's inconsistent writing, and the marker will pick it up and you will also lose marks. So pace your work evenly, prioritize where you will put each information. So if you're focusing, I would say for this text, your main focus would be the body sections and your examples of specific like diverse societies, or what we can use to encourage aliens. So give an example of the cultural diversity we've got, give an example of science or technology or anything of that sort. Make sure to provide hardcore evidence for them to feel drawn in and want to actually visit Earth. So that will be the main focus. So you don't need to spend too much time on your introduction. And we did identify through the stimulus that the question only wants us to briefly introduce Earth to the aliens. So you will need to give a brief introduction, brief conclusion, but focus deeply into the evidence part, which is going to be your main part of the letter. And then when you finish writing, make sure you leave time to proofread your work. Many students put all their time into writing and then write to the very last second until pen's down, and they forget to proofread your work. It's very important that you take at least a minute to proofread your work, because there are silly mistakes you can make when you are writing fast. You can leave out words, have spelling mistakes, grammar, punctuation errors, all that kind of things. And those, unfortunately, are easy marks that you are throwing away if you don't proofread. So keep your eye on the time, manage your time properly, and also make sure that you have some time to proofread. You'll be surprised with how much mistakes you probably accidentally made when you're writing and after you proofread your work. So the following guide here is just a brief outline on how you should allocate your 20 minutes to write. So this is a recommendation you should use to follow for any text or any writing task. And here it says, take about 1 minute to read the stimulus, then brainstorm ideas. So when you're reading the stimulus, think of any ideas that you could potentially use. And then in the next 2 minutes, plan your piece using dot points. So in the given planning sheet, jot the points down. And when we say jot the points down, don't just write any points. Make sure you know which points you want to talk about first and which points you want to talk about next. So that would be essentially structuring your response as well as brainstorming your ideas on paper at the same time. So you save time essentially. And then I would say spend approximately 16 minutes to write your text. And when you do this task, you will realize that if you have properly planned out your response in your planning sheet or your planning section, writing it out would be a lot easier because you've got your information there. You just refer back to the point and write accordingly. So you don't have to actually think of an idea. Your ideas are already there. You are just building on those ideas in your actual response. So that saves time. A lot of students think it's not important to write a plan or do anything of plan, just jump straight into writing. You do realize that if you jump straight into writing without a clear structure or a clear plan, you are risking your time and you are going to end up in the middle of your writing. You possibly could have a brain freeze and you will forget what you want to write about next, and that's wasting time. So write everything out first, dot points, and then use that as a reference to build up your response in your actual writing. And then just before time is up, take about 1 minute to proofread your text. So reading through, making sure you're not spelling errors or any grammatical errors or leaving out punctuation like commas and full stops, making sure that everything makes sense, and then that will be times up. So making sure that planning is very important. So when it comes to writing a response to any question, you have many different ways to answer the question. You've got different ideas, different points, different description, different language that can be used, and it's very broad, so there's not specifically a set answer, this is right or wrong, but we do have general guidelines and criteria that we need to fill if we want to achieve the highest marks. So right now we've got 2 examples. We've got a bad example and also a good example. Note that you don't have to write exactly the same as the good example, but we need to take note of the structure and what it is talking about. So when it comes to this specific text, which is the competition writing and inviting extraterrestrial beings to Earth and convincing them on the way, there are many different aspects that we can talk about on Earth. So we can talk about tradition, for example, we can talk about culture, we can talk about technology, we can talk about history, we can talk about science, we can talk about education. All that kind of points is correct, but the point is, how are we going to express these? And the main idea is, when you write a text, do not select and try to include everything that you can think of. It's better to include less dot points, but more deeply. So select a few, but make sure that you go deeper down into it and actually emphasize and elaborate on each part, so that the reader, the marker, is able to understand what you are talking about. If you skim past all your points without much depth, that's just surface writing, and it's not going to give you any deep insight, and especially for this kind of text, you're not going to be very persuasive if you're just talking about everything. So you need to take that into note, and we're going to compare the bad and the good example. So first of all, we're going to read through, and I'll be going through what's wrong with each part, and then we'll read through the good example, and then we'll compare it. So if you look at the bad example first, this is what we do not want you to write like. So first of all, just looking at the title over here, we can already tell that there is something wrong with this title. Want your words into space. Remember that we are writing a letter, so we are inviting them, not specifically using a rhetorical question such as this one. This kind of title would be more suited for a newspaper article. So it's a little bit too colloquial, and also it doesn't quite fit the text type in which we're using for a letter. So take that into note as well. Then moving on to the actual body text, do you want to communicate with a extraterrestrial? Yes, I do. There are a number of errors in this first line. First of all, there are spelling errors with extraterrestrial, and the use of A should be N. It is too colloquial to start off when it comes off to a letter. You are trying to invite them, and like what the stimulus has asked us, we need to invite them in a warm way. This comes off as a little bit confronting and a little bit too direct for them to feel welcome. It's more interrogative sort of tone, I could say. So you need to be careful with your first line. You need to establish the right mood and right emotion. So if we write down here, so we need to think about mood and emotion. And then the next part where it says, yes, I do, you don't need to answer your own question. If you want to direct a question to the reader, you are allowing the reader to think. You want the reader to have their own internal response. You don't need to include this kind of yes I do, which is answering your own question. That wouldn't fit the language technique of a rhetorical question. So if we move on, if we blast it into space, in will be awesome. Note that we've got an error here. This should be it. This is clearly the case of a student who hasn't proofread their work. Some people think that aliens are alive so they can go to space and have a great time. This line doesn't answer the question. We are inviting them. We are not talking about humans going into space. So this kind of line doesn't exactly give a purpose, and it doesn't relate to the actual question or the stimulus. Moving on, aliens are not only green, they can be any kind. Humans want, note that there's an error here, want to take photographs. There's an error there as well, but it is impossible because aliens can be hiding, or even you'll be jumping up and down. The photo will be, I assume this means wobbly. Again, this paragraph does not answer the question, and there is no purpose or depth into this paragraph. So it doesn't really show us anything, and it doesn't really give us any insights. More of a filler sort of kind of in another way. It's not essential information that we need. Then moving on, the kinds of aliens are 2 eyes, 4-eyed aliens, and many more. We are not focusing on appearances. So appearances, we are not talking about this one, so give it a cross. And also, you don't need to put one line for a paragraph. Children wants to bring aliens to Earth so they can get destroyed our Earth. This one needs a capital E. But kids never notice that will happen. Again, it doesn't relate to the purpose of the question. It's not really talking about anything. Next part, aliens extinct. There's an error here. Spelling errors because they destroy human beings. This sentence does not make sense. Humans are now special by being what they want to be, but in alien life, it is not like that. Again, this 2 sentences doesn't make sense. We can say that this part does have a little bit of a meaning. Humans are now special. But when we talk about special, notice that the language you're trying to say is indicating that aliens are not special. So that doesn't really invite them warmly. So, and when you say special, you need to elaborate. So always have to elaborate and emphasize on what you are talking about. Elaborating means including evidence and examples. Spelling error, not even get that much food. How do you know this? This is not something we can assume. They will have to have the same food every single day. If they were sick, there will not be any medicine in space to look after. We are not making assumptions about space. This is not something we want to, give to the aliens to read that indicates that we don't know anything about you, and your life over there must be very hard. This is not something we want to talk about. Next part is, if they can't go to school like us, error, go to school, they will no home, no warm clothes to wear. The sentence is, there's a lot of grammar errors. They will not even have water to drink, again, or even no technology to play with. There will not be many alien friends to play with. It will be boring. So in my opinion, I think aliens' life is boring. Therefore, alien life is boring. So we can see that this is a very bad example. First of all, if we were to carefully write down what the problem was, did not proofread. The student clearly did not proofread. There were way too many grammar errors, spelling errors, and sentences that did not make sense. So the student did not proofread. The text is not a letter. So this is the wrong format. There's no format at all. There's a very unclear structure. Unclear structure or it's just chunks of information, lines after line that don't make sense. Does not answer the question. This is the most important part. If it doesn't answer the question, the entire piece of writing will become redundant. There is no persuasive language. And also, if we were to think about the context or what it should be talking about, the writing clearly does not give any examples. No support. So no support / evidence or information about human life. Remember that we are trying to promote human life on Earth, and if we aren't able to do that, there is no point. That's the main purpose of the question. So this is a very bad example. So I've jotted down some points that indicate why this piece of writing is not good, and we'll go through the good example. So first of all, we've got a short, succinct, and appropriate title over here. Then we've got Dear Extraterrestrials. This is also correct because it's in the format of a piece of a letter. So that already fulfills our structure criteria. We come in peace. We humans would like to invite you to come and visit planet Earth. We hope to find out more information about your species and any other species you know of. Earth is a beautiful planet with many different religions or beliefs and heritages. So we have in the short introduction that we are inviting extraterrestrials to come to Earth. And we also, at the same time, we are curious to find out more about them. And we introduce that Earth is a beautiful planet with different religion or beliefs and heritages. That already indicates some of the qualities that we will be talking about for Earth and what they can look forward to. So moving on, we would firstly like to get to know you and your species. So we have an interest in them. And you can get to know more about us. So there is that sharing sort of about knowledge and understanding different perspectives and life forms of someone on a different planet. We introduce ourselves as we are very friendly, welcoming creatures who each have their own unique personality. This is another positive trait that we're trying to promote. We would offer you a place to stay and we will take you on a tour around our planet. You must come to visit our picturesque, amazing utopia, and we may even visit yours. So at the same time of promoting our globe as picturesque, amazing utopia, we may even visit yours, indicates that we also have an interest in learning about you. So instead of us trespassing your territory first, we are inviting you to come to us and establish that trust so that we can perhaps go together for your planet. And then in addition, we could join forces to create technology. So this is another thing or aspect that we are talking about that would make our planets a better or easier place to live in. Our species would be like peas in a pod. So we're trying to establish the trust and friendship, the best of friends. Also, you must help us, because if we have technology on our planet, for example, so providing examples here, this is good. Teleporters, we could teleport the machinery to your planet. We may be wondering, why should we come to your planet? Well, we don't have yet the technology and spacecraft to visit your planet, not to mention that we don't know where it is. So come visit planet Earth, Milky Way galaxy. So we are indicating trust and establishing friendship and kind of staying humble about our developments. We don't want to push too far and make the aliens sound as if they can't keep up with us or anything. We want to invite them warmly and indicate that we possibly do need help, and we want them to help us in any way, so that we can also at the same time provide them with the experience of doing so. So our next final part is, if you come to visit our planet, we'll be very grateful and in return offer our technological devices. Our greatest invention was a Mars rover, a robotic machine built to land on Mars and send back information on the planet. Humans are extremely intelligent animals, in fact the smartest on Earth. We eat and drink, which keeps us alive, and without doing that we die. So come and visit our amazing planet. Final line is, so please come and visit Earth. We could join forces and you could visit our amazing planet. Yours sincerely, humans. So this is our good example. We can see that there are, in comparison to the other bad example, we've got, let's zoom this in, no grammar errors. So let's write this in. No grammar or punctuation errors. In relation to the second point, we've got a letter format. If we zoom that in, we answer the question. We use persuasive language. And we also have talked about the technology part of human life. So positive aspects of human life. We have chosen to talk about technology. So we can see that although there are many different aspects of human life that we can talk about, we decided to choose and stick with technology as our main point of persuasion. So that's something that can intrigue them and indicate that they could help us and we could help them in any sort of way. So remember what we said before, that we don't want to include too many points and just skim over everything. We need to pick a few points, or in this case, pick one point and elaborate and emphasize and break down exactly what it is and what part of it will attract the reader. So if we look at the technology part, which we for this good example used to invite the extraterrestrial beings to Earth, we also indicated examples here, such as the Mars rover, which was a robotic machine built to land on Mars and send back information on planet. So this specific example, we can see this is an example, is used to highlight some of our achievements and some of the things that we're willing to share with them. So that is also another highlight point for extraterrestrial beings. In comparison to the bad example, we can see that clearly there is no specific human life or positive aspect that we want to focus on. In the bad example, it's simply just going on and talking about, or essentially just making assumptions about aliens that we don't know if is true or not, and the whole point is to actually talk about Earth. So we're not talking about aliens, we are talking about Earth. So this bad example clearly does not answer the question in any way, and it will definitely receive quite a low mark, considering it has not essentially answered the question. So when writing this good example, we also take note of the form. So we use the letter format, which was the most suitable text type to use, but we also note that the writer, the person who wrote this, clearly has a, let's make this a bit more clear over here, has an introduction over here, and then we've got the body section here, and then we've got a conclusion. So in the introduction, it's talking about how the purpose of this letter, so we want to invite extraterrestrials to Earth, but then at the same time we also want to learn about them. And some of the stuff that we can offer them could be different religions, beliefs, and heritages. It would be more recommended if the writer in this part, let's write it a bit more clearly. Let's use blue this time. Instead of writing about different religion, beliefs, and heritages, because we talked about technology later on, it'll be recommended that we actually note of our technology innovations, for example. I think this will be more suitable instead of talking about different religions, beliefs, and heritages, because we haven't specifically talked about them in the rest of the text. And then the first paragraph indicates that we want to know more about the aliens, and so they can also get to know about us. We indicated that we are very welcoming people, and we've got our own unique personality traits. So we're indicating uniqueness and indicating that we are different from everyone else. And also highlighting utopia, which is an image of peace and perfection. Remember, not talking about the negative points because that's not required. And then in addition, we could join forces to create technology that we would have our planet. So this whole entire section over here is talking about technology. So because this part is talking about technology, we should mention it in our introduction instead of talking about religion and heritages. Then in the end, we gave an example over here. So we had an example, and then we also came up with a warm conclusion. So this would be the type of writing that we would aim or focus on. And then in the next part, we are going to plan our own section for this task using perhaps a different approach. So not talking about technology, because there are so many different responses and different aspects we can talk about. So now that we've gone through the stimulus together and indicated what we should talk about or what we should look out for, think of, as well as going through a bad example and a good example, we will be attempting to write a response to this question by ourselves. So what we've got here is some tips for this specific writing task. Some of them also apply to other genres, but this is more catered towards test 1. And then on the right-hand side, on page 10, you can see that we've got our planning sheet. So this will be the template that you can download yourself for brainstorming and also just planning out your ideas before you actually jump into the response straight away. So some of these ideas are already jotted down here, but we'll go through them together. Let's go through the writing tips over here. Recall that our appropriate text type is a persuasive text in the form of a letter. So let's just highlight this part. I think this will be a bit clearer. Yep, so we'll use this one. So persuasive text in the form of a letter. And then persuasive texts need to use convincing vocabulary and support evidence to highlight your point. And then we use persuasive language techniques such as high modality words and low modality words. So high modality words would be more catered for example, highly recommended. So I'll just put over here. So you're very certain about your words. That would be high modality. And then low modality would be should or could. I wouldn't suggest you using low modality words, but this is just a technique that you should know of in case for other text types. So we'll focus mostly on using high modality words, which would, for example, be highly recommended, highly suggest, anything that shows confidence in what you're saying. In our next point, you may have a broad perspective on what you want to write about, but limit yourself to only a few points. So what we said before is choose a few points that you want to talk about in depth. Don't talk about everything because there are endless possibilities and you won't be able to fit everything in 20 minutes, but pick 1 or 2 points. So for example, in the good example, we've got technology as our main focus point, and then we need to elaborate and build on that. What can that aspect do for the aliens? What can we gain out of it if aliens contribute? And what are some examples that we can use to attract them? So have a think about that. So we don't want surface ideas, we want in-depth, but only to limited responses, so not covering every single thing. We want to emphasize and elaborate on your chosen points, so that's what we indicated before. Elaborate and emphasize on your chosen points to provide depth and detail. Very important here. Always give examples to support your point, otherwise there's no point of including it. So if you're just going to mention it once, you might as well just don't include it. You need to build up on your main points. Do not sway away from the original question and end up talking about the aspect of human life, but remember that you are using this as a basis point for your main purpose. So, always put in mind of the original question and talk about the aspect of human life. So this is our main focus point as well. But make sure that you are using the question as a basis point for your main purpose. So you are building up on your main point. So indicate here, building up. Or aspect that you've had chosen. Given this text, do not mention negative aspects of human life. Do not write on the surface, meaning that you skim over ideas in general. We just went through that. Be careful not to turn your writing into a summary of what Earth is great. Choose a few aspects to talk about deeply. So in relation to the previous point, don't go through every single part and skim over the general positive aspects of Earth and then think that's okay. You need to really break it down, because just assume that the alien doesn't know anything about Earth. They know nothing, and if you go through everything, it'll be too overwhelming and not detailed enough for them to actually understand or create a sense of connection with human life or human lifestyles. So you want to choose 1 or 2 points and then break it down and elaborate, emphasize, include examples and all that. So I'll say do not turn it into a summary. Put a big cross next to that. Okay, moving on to the next page, we've got our writing planning sheet for test number 1. For this part, you can see that we've got the title, so you need to come up with a title over here. This would be, so you write the title. Again, not too colloquial or doesn't suit the format of a letter. So in our previous example, the bad one, where we had a colloquial question, colloquial language being used for a rhetorical question, that wouldn't be very suitable for a letter. It might be more suitable for a news article or a debate or something like that. So take into account the genre that you're writing, make sure you come up with a suitable title. The next part is to brainstorm or dot point your ideas. So I have written out some examples here that will indicate some of the potential positive human life aspects that you can talk about. So if we go through those, let's use a different color. We've got the desire to cross-learn. So you want to cross-learn, which means humans want to learn from aliens, and aliens could also learn from humans, not globally, but across planets to new horizons, to serve new boundaries, to share ideas and develop new innovations. To share ideas and develop new innovations. Positive aspects of human life on Earth could be new technologies, new things to learn, historical elements to see. So remember that if you decide to choose one of these, focus on something, focus on an aspect. So if you want to choose talking about technologies, you can talk about phones and the internet. You can talk about things that you can learn, including arts, music or science, historical elements, including buildings or paintings. I would highly recommend you to choose just one of this. Don't include everything because it will become overwhelming for the reader. Choose one thing, but some of the things that you could talk about, you can talk about phones, how everything's becoming so much easier when it comes to just general life, so you can check everything on the phone. It's portable, you can bring it everywhere. The internet has become, everyone relies on the internet for information searching. You don't have to go anywhere physically. It's all, at the tip of your fingers. Things to learn, you can talk about arts, music, science across cultures. There's so many different types of arts and music. You can learn from, depending on where you are in the world, the people that you interact with, what it can bring to you and what kind of perspective of life it can open up. So those are just some things you can think about. Historical elements, you can see the evolution of human beings and the development of or the modernization of the world, what it has brought to us in terms of infrastructure, as well as in relation to technology, and how it has created a better lifestyle for everybody on Earth, and how we want to actually invite aliens to experience those changes and developments throughout time. So that is something else you can think about when talking about a positive aspect of human life. In terms of traveling and experiencing cultures, again, you can talk about the Oriental traditions and food from the Far East. So East Asia, you can talk about spices from Middle East. You can talk about art, historical movements of the West, or indigenous beliefs from all over the world. So culture would be another thing that you can talk about as well. Remember that culture actually ties in very strongly with this, because culture influences these elements. So culture has a very strong influence on history, the stuff that we learn, especially in arts and music, as well as technology. So the way that we actually use these things and how we integrate them within our lifestyle that is based on culture. So have a think about this one as well. And then for our next part, you can have text structure. So we have our clear introduction over here. This is our part 1. Then we've got body 1, body 2, and then also our conclusion. So in our introduction, we want to welcome aliens, indicate that we are friendly people to everyone and anything that is living. Our purpose is to share our knowledge with people beyond the scope of Earth's face and in turn learn from them as well. Then we're going to move on to the positive aspects of human life. Highlight that one. Positive aspects of human life on Earth, such as technology, learning, history. I would say choose one of this. Choose only one. Traveling and experiencing cultures. That could be food, music, thinking, way of life. So these two are intertied. I would say you can use these points, food, music, thinking, way of life, and religion, especially thinking, way of life, and religion, and how that has contributed to technology, learning, and history. And then also conclusion, we want to indicate that aliens and extraterrestrial beings won't be disappointed by Earth's vast array of activities, teachings of different perspectives to the element of life and existence. It's the last part over here, indicating that they will have a very good time on Earth. So that is our planning sheet for the main part. The last section, which indicates extra points and ideas, you can think of specific vocabulary. You can think about language. Think about language use and all that kind of thing to create a flow. So I'll write that down as well. Create flow of ideas. And what we mean by flow is the fact that you need to create links between each part, links between positive aspects of life as well as your persuasion. Making sure that those parts tie in together nicely so that the reader will be certainly convinced. And this should help you to choose a specific positive area and then create your own response.